I'm Alejandra.
Bonjour, I'm Jon.
And welcome to the very first episode of
What the Cloud?
All right, Jon, I'm curious. What are we going to talk about first?
So today, in this very first episode, we're going to talk about AWS. And then to get our journey started on that side, the first thing we're going to need is an identity and access management user.
Whoa. Back it up. I have a question, Jon. Isn't that a little bit too far ahead? For example, we still haven't told everybody what AWS stands for. Not to mention, we probably want to explain concepts like availability zone or servers and data centers first before we can jump into IAM.
That's my bad. I just assumed that everyone knew what AWS stands for, and then I went right into it. So I'm sorry. So roll that back, right? And let's start with AWS. It stands for Amazon Web Services, and that is a cloud provider. So first thing we're going to go and look into is what is the definition of a cloud itself? The on-demand delivery of IT resources over the internet with a pay-as-you-go model. That's the definition.
Okay, so why don't we start by defining IT resources first? So these are things like storage. For example, maybe you need a lot of storage because you have a lot of pictures to store. And if you go ahead and start storing all of the pictures you've ever taken in the world into your first primary laptop, you're probably going to run out of space in your laptop really fast. So at some point, you need to store that on a bigger computer. We usually call these servers. So for example...
What the cloud is a server?
Oh my goodness, Jon, you're right. I just assumed what my audience didn't know. My bad. All right, so a server is a software or hardware device that accepts and responds to requests made over a network.
So storage and servers are two IT resources. There are many more, like emails, for example.
Oh, okay. So before we keep going, though, I gotta ask, how does the on-demand model fit into all of this?
Right, so that on-demand delivery that is right there. When it comes to all of these IT resources, you'll normally have to acquire them. If you think about these servers, when you're starting a project, you will need to think about the amount of money that you have to spend on acquiring all of that hardware equipment to get those resources, right? The storage, the emails, all of that. That means that you have to make a plan for all those resources ahead of time. If you are just starting a project, how can you even know what you need? Get too few resources, right? So I have a small little server here with a certain amount of money, and you're going to have to go ask for more money for your project later on. Get too much resources, right? A way bigger server that costs way more money, right? And you're going to be wasting that money if you're not using it all. That's the on-demand part. Meanwhile, you could have spent that money hiring the right people for your project.
And this is also where the pay-as-you-go model fits in, right? So you have the resources, servers, storage, networking, but only as you need them, which is why it's called on-demand. If you use them, you pay for them. If you're not using any resources, you don't need to pay for them either. So instead, let's just use that money to help you get more people to join your company.
So, if I'm following this correctly, by paying only for what you are using, you will get charged when your company is using more of those resources. If you use more resources, it probably means you have more actual customers. Then, if you don't have customers, and you have a reduction on the amount of customers, then you can reduce the amount of resources that you are using.
Okay, cool. So let's do a small recap here, Jon. So far, we've talked about things like IT resources. We also defined what pay-as-you-go model means. We defined on-demand, but we haven't really gone over the part of the definition of over the internet. What does that really mean? Right.
So what that really means is those IT resources, you access them over the internet. So what's the internet, right? It's like a website.
Okay, kind of like Amazon.com.
Yeah, that will be an example, right? Okay, fair enough. So over the internet in itself. So let's take over the internet. It's very similar to that website you just mentioned. To get to those resources, you'll go to a website that is called aws.amazon.com. And you ask for those resources. So there you have it. That's the definition of cloud. Now, The cloud of Amazon is called Amazon Web Services, or AWS for short. Instead of calling it IT resources, we call them services. A service of storage, a service of emails, a service of servers. Those services, they are available over the web. Web is like the internet. It's a synonym of the internet. It comes from www, right? World Wide Web. Then since these services are provided by Amazon, right? So Amazon provides these services. We call that the Amazon Web Services, or AWS for short.
All right, I gotta say, Jon, that might very well be the first time that ever made sense for anybody.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and take a look at the website you were mentioning a second ago?
Yeah.
Amazon.com?
AWS and Amazon.com, right? So that's the website here, and then you can look at the products page. And if you look in there, you can see that there is over 179 of them. And there's even your most favorite one, right? RoboMaker.
I might like to do things with robots now and then.
So,
I mean, somebody's got to take over the world, Jon.
right? Yeah, fair enough. Yep. I'm good with that. Kind of.
Maybe.
So, but let's not worry about this right now, and not worry about the 175 plus services right now. What I want to point out here is that these services need to live somewhere. That somewhere is physical, on the land. I know we use the term cloud a lot, and then just sidetrack here, cloud. Whenever you see someone talking about the cloud and then they look up, they're not talking about the right cloud. The cloud we're talking here is down on the land. It's physical. So these services, these servers, they need to be able to connect into each other. They need to be physical on land. And in that physical space is what we will typically call a data center.
So I'm thinking this would be a really good time to introduce the concept of availability zones.
Yes. Yeah,
All
let's
right,
do it.
Let's go over that. Can we have a fancy,
Drawing.
super fancy Jon drawing?
Absolutely, let's do that.
Okay. All right, everybody, let's get ready for this. So we're going to imagine a parking lot with a whole bunch of buildings all around you. Each one of these buildings could be a data center that has a ton of hardware in them. All of these buildings would be what we call an availability zone, or AZ for short. Okay, now we're going to take this exercise a whole other step further. We're going to imagine that a horrible, catastrophic event just occurred to one of these buildings. Jon, okay, what happened? Was there a fire maybe?
Yes, fire.
Oh my goodness, there was a fire everywhere. The whole building was on fire. But it didn't stop there, did it? No. You see, after the fire, Jon, we had a flood.
Oh my God, yes.
There
water,
was a
water.
Awful flood. I mean, whew. Okay. I know that in reality, the likelihood of the event, something like that happening and impacting every building in that parking lot is probably pretty high.
Yep.
But again, this is a YouTube channel, so we can kind of get away with a lot of things. Okay. Okay, so back to business. What would this mean, really? What if this happened? The servers that you were using inside of that parking lot, anything you were running on those servers is not available anymore. Let's imagine that you had maybe a blog post. If you had a blog hosted there in one of those servers in one of those buildings, I have news for you. You don't have a blog anymore. Right?
Gone.
Nope. Because that's hardware, people. I mean, you just got burned and flooded. You don't have a blog. So we need to make a copy of that blog. What can we do? Any ideas, Jon?
Well, we definitely can't copy that blog to any of these buildings that we have here. They're all flooded and they're all burning, right? It's insane, the parking lot. So maybe it's not running in the clouds, so it has to be physical land somewhere. Maybe another availability zone?
Aha! That's correct. You win a gold star, Jon.
Awesome. I can finally draw my gold star. So here it is.
You've been waiting to do that, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And it is mine. You can't take it.
You really find the need to write that?
Yes, it is definitely my gold star. No one can take it anymore.
It is Jon's gold star. Nobody's taking it away. It's okay. All right, so while Jon is guarding his gold star, let's get back to availability zones. So you may want another availability zone, just like Jon recommended, and that is, for example, what our company AWS provides. we have 69 availability zones across the world, even as we're talking right now. So we regroup these availability zones into what we call a region. A region is made up of 2 or more availability zones, and an availability zone is made up of 1 or more data centers. So John, I'm a little bit curious now. Why do you think we even have to have regions? Why can't we just call it another availability zone?
So the regroupment is very important. It's to make multiple copies of the blog you talked about within an area. You may not want to put your blog in a certain country due to legal reasons. Or maybe you want your blog to be close to your users, like very close to them. Where are your users? You're going to pick a region to be able to do that. Or because the price that you will have to pay in one of those areas, in one of those regions versus the other is going to be different or more expensive. So this area is a region. There's a certain distance inside of that region in between these availability zones as you see it in the drawing. This distance can't be too small. As you said earlier, where an event is happening to one building, it could affect the other buildings around as well. So it can't be too close so that the fire doesn't go to the other side, but it cannot be too far either because we need to be able to copy the data really, really quick. That blog, that data blog that we talked about, it needs to be able to be copied across these availability zones really, really quickly. So we regroup these availability zones inside of a region. So there's 69 availability zones and there are 22 regions as we speak across the world.
Okay, I'm kind of curious, John. Can we kind of take a look at a website that might show us some of this stuff?
Absolutely. Here's an example of a website that can do that. It is the infrastructure.aws. And then as you can see it here, there are 22 regions, like I said, and then they are all in orange. So all of those little orange boxes as you see them there.
You know, that's quite a lot, but what about the places in the world where there isn't a region?
So you're totally right here. So let's say that we pick in the middle of the United States. There is nothing there in terms of amount of the regions themselves of AWS, but there are people there. So we need to figure out a way to get your blog really close to those users. So how can we do that? Well, another drawing from me, right?
Another John drawing.
I know, right? So the first thing that we could do, if we think about your blog, that blog, we need a laptop of a user. So let's draw a laptop of a user. You could try to copy your blog inside of that laptop. The problem is, will you really try to go to every one of your users and try to give them their blog and somehow that's not going to work. So that's the closest place you can be though. What's the next closest place that you could be to them? That next one is called the router. The router that they have at home, that they connect their Wi-Fi to. Are you really going to try to hack every routers that are everywhere around the world of every of your users?
No, actually, John, let's not hack and let's be good people here.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree. Let's not even try to do that, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so not the router.
Not the router.
So if it can't be the laptop, it can't be the router, what's the next best place? Well, your router, it connects into something that is called an internet service provider.
Ah, so that's what an ISP stands for.
Exactly, ISP. So there are many ISPs across the world, right? So I may have another, you may have another person reading your blog that is right there, that is connecting into their router, that is connecting into their ISP. And yeah, like now you could try to go to every one of the ISP across the entire world and ask them to host your blog and to pick your blog. But I don't think they will want to do that for you. So, unfortunately, what you're going to have to find is yet another place that is as close as possible to your user. That could be the cloud, but the problem is the cloud is far in this case, right? We're in the middle of the United States as we were showing up a little bit earlier. So, what's the next best place? Well, the next best place is the place where these internet service providers connect into each other. And these are, so they connect into this blue point that I have just drawn there. And then these places are what we call points of presence, or they could also be called peering locations. The ISP connects in those locations, physical connection. AWS can also put a little bit of stuff there. They could put certain servers in there. what do you think we call those locations in AWS?
I think we call those edge locations.
That is correct.
If I'm not mistaken, we have 212 of them.
Exactly, 212 edge locations.
Okay, so we got to remember, this is smaller than a region, which means you won't have every 175 plus AWS services there. There might only be 6 available there. You probably want to grab one of those and help copy or cache whatever you need for your blog to each one of these edge locations, and then this way it'll be very close to your user. So this way your blog is going to show up in the browser way faster.
Exactly. So, in today's episode, we first talked about the cloud in general, what AWS stands for. Then we went over the global infrastructure, which starts with data center somewhere, that then arrives inside availability zones, at least one data center per availability zones. And then there's 2 availability zones per region. And then we realized that, yeah, there's 22 regions across the world. But then we also went over to edge location with 212 to try to be as close as possible to your users, to your bloggers, or your readers of your blog. So I think that's it for the first episode, right?
I think we covered quite a lot of ground. Thank you all so much for joining and enjoying the show with us today. And Jon and I are really excited to have finally gotten to do the very first episode of
What the Cloud?
And we look forward to doing the next episode. So don't forget to subscribe and join us.
Awesome. See ya.